Okay, in this tutorial, we're going to be taking a look at setting up an oven model to lay over onto your profile plot with the lengths of each zone in your machine and also the temperature set points. And so to get started, we can go ahead and step into Map Software here and click the Profile tab on the bottom. You'll see we have our downloaded information from our SMG2, and it's a pretty bare looking profile plot right now. But if you go to the top, you can select Machine Oven drop down menu there, and for now we're going to select Set Machine Information. And so if we click the drop down menu in this screen here, you can see the list of default ovens that come with Map software. And if your oven doesn't happen to be in this list for any reason, that's quite all right. And we'll walk through how to create an oven today. And so I'm going to cancel out of this screen. A lot of times it's best to create your own oven anyways, and I'll touch more on that here in just a moment. But for now, go ahead and select the Machine Oven drop-down menu again, and we'll go to Create New Machine. And it's going to start by asking you some basic questions about your oven, how you want to measure your zone units, whether that's in centimeters or inches or length of time. You can do that as well. I'm going to leave it as centimeters for this tutorial. And the number of zones in your oven is, of course, that's very important. And I'm going to say that we have a 9-zone oven with 7 heating and 2 cooling zones. And we'll leave the temperature units in Celsius. You can change those to Fahrenheit if you want to. And my conveyor speed happens to be 70 centimeters per minute. You'll definitely want to enter your actual conveyor speed here, and you can do that in centimeters per minute or inches per minute or in time measurements as well. And so now that you've entered the initial information there to begin creating your oven, we get to the fun part of setting the length of each zone. And the best way to determine the actual length of each zone in your oven is to physically measure it with a tape measure, to go out to it when it's off and take a tape measure across the full length of the oven. And so just to give you a better idea of what we're looking for here, I'm going to switch to a visual aid for a moment. And you'll want to start the tape measure at the beginning of zone 1 and lay it throughout the entire oven and to the end of the last zone. And the reason this is important, and you've probably already noticed that you have spaces between your oven zones, and we do need to account for those as well. And so in this next slide you can see for the measurement of zone 1, we want to measure from the beginning of zone 1 to the center point between zone 1 and zone 2. And so this means, just for example, if your zone 1 on your oven is 30 centimeters long and the space between zone 1 and zone 2 is 4 centimeters, you'll want to enter a value in Map software of 32 centimeters for the length of zone 1. And the next slide shows a great visual of this, capturing that space between the zones. And so so on and so forth here. What you'll want to do, for example, for zone 2 is measure from halfway between zone 1 and zone 2 to halfway between zone 2 and zone 3 and enter that value in the Map software. And so jumping back into Map here, I'm just going to begin entering the lengths in centimeters for each zone that I have written down here. With the cooling zones at the end being a little bit longer. And then we'll want to enter our temperature set points for our recipe as well. And I'm just going to enter some standard figures here for the temperature. This is Celsius. And another really cool thing that you can do in this menu is customize it to your liking. You can name each zone differently if you want to distinguish them, aside from just zone 1, zone 2, etc. And I'll show you what I'm talking about here. Let's say, for example, we want to make clear to everybody that these are cooling zones at the end. I'm going to rename these cooling 1, and we'll do cooling 2 to give them a custom name. And you can also actually change the color, how they're displayed on the profile plot, by clicking the color palette next to the zone. And you can really come up with a color scheme if you want to, just to kind of show that it's getting warmer as it progresses through the oven. And we'll do blue for the cooling zones at the end there. And we'll get to see how this appears on the plot in just a moment. And so once you've entered all of your oven information with the number of zones, your conveyor speed, as well as your zone lengths and set points, definitely don't forget to save your oven and so that you can use it for future profiles. So we'll go ahead and click the Save As button there. And I'm just going to name this my Electrovert OmniFlow 7 oven. And so now that that's saved, we can hit OK. And you can see it automatically applies it to the profile plot for us, with zone 1 starting in yellow and getting warmer and warmer in color until we reach the cooling zones at the end, which are nicely labeled for us there. It also shows our temperature set points as we progress through each zone. And what we can do now, if we need to adjust this a little, for example, the process origin, it may default to starting somewhere approximately right here. And it's important for people to know that this is not actually the beginning of your profile in most circumstances. That's not the beginning of your oven. What you would want to do, it would look something more like this when it really starts to ramp up, because that heat that the thermal profiler sees in the beginning of its recording is usually just heat coming out of the front of your oven or the entry area of your oven before it reaches zone 1. And so this is a more realistic beginning point for your first zone. And another really handy thing we can do here, if we select Profile at the top and align Profile Peaks, that was already done in this instance, but if we align Profile Peaks, what that does is in this area here, that aligns the peak of your profile to the end of the zone with the highest set point. And so since zone 7 has our hottest set point of 265, that's going to align the peak of the profile to the end of that zone. And a lot of times that can correct any small differences with the downloaded thermal data that you have and your actual measured oven zones. And so one last thing to take a look at if you need to make any minor tweaks to the lengths of the zones upon the download, if it's slightly off from the thermal data in any way. Another thing that you can do is click on the profile, and we're going to, let's see here, actually I'm sorry, click on Machine Oven Information and select Adjust Zones. It will let you know that this is only going to apply to this current profile, so it's not going to change your oven that you have saved in any way. But what you can do here is make small modifications. If you can see the definite space between the zones needs moved a little bit, you can make those small modifications by clicking Machine Oven and Adjust Zones, and then you can grab the handlebars at the top there. And so now that we've walked through how to accurately measure your oven zone lengths and get those entered into map software along with your temperature set points and how to apply that overlay on the graph, you'll be pretty well equipped to use your oven model in future profiles.